The banks are coming for your stablecoin yields, and this is going to be a breakdown of how all this happens. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back into the show. Let's just go over to this clip right here. This is an interesting statement. This is recent estimates from JP Morgan Chase analysts, and all this is happening because of the Genius Act. Remember, the Genius Act basically says that issuers cannot collect or give yield on stablecoins. Well, the loophole is being able to allow places like Coinbase and other exchanges to actually do that. And they state here, it's worth considering how much higher demand for stablecoins would be if this evasion continues to be permitted. That's how crazy the banks are about this right now. And they are trying to take away all yields and completely decimate the idea of using stablecoins. So one of the things that this will do is it's most likely going to force a lot of the crypto native and new people coming into DeFi. And one of the places that could actually excel is inside the Sui network. So we wanted to bring on an expert to discuss it today. Stephen Mackintosh, who's the Chief Investment Officer over at Sui Group Holdings. And you guys have changed your names, Stephen. So welcome into the show.
Thank you. Great to be back, Paul. Since we last spoken, we have officially rebranded as SUIG, which stands for Sui Group Holdings. And we actually, as part of our partnership with the Sui Foundation, have the right to use the Sui trademark, the Sui name, the brand identity, as a public company now on NASDAQ, which is super cool.
This is going to be a big deal. When you look at digital asset treasury companies, obviously Sui is one of the key companies and projects that we're watching very closely. Another is, of course, the announcement here on Athena Labs introducing Sui USDE and USDI. These are two native dollar assets. Let's talk a little bit about in terms of liquidity. When you look at traditional banks out there that have been holding assets, not paying yields, now we're starting to see this massive growth in both DeFi, but also on exchanges. How do you think this is going to pan out when all the dust settles of what's going on in DC?
Well, I think the first thing is to give some credit to Guy Young from Athena, who I think really won hearts and minds over the summer with the Hyperliquid proposal. Hyperliquid, obviously, were looking to issue their own native stablecoin, right? And they kind of essentially had like a public RFP process. And what was great about his proposal to the Hyperliquid community was that it focused on, driving the fees, the yield back into the ecosystem. And I think that's a very powerful concept. I think, many blockchains now are thinking, well, shouldn't the output of our activity come back into the ecosystem? What we did at SUIG is we took a very novel step to be the first DAT to actually issue stablecoins, part of our strategy. And we did that in partnership with Athena and the Sui Foundation. But what we're essentially doing is white labeling the Athena engine and bringing it to Sui. So there's going to be two native stablecoins that are going to go live. The first is Sui USDE, which is the yield-bearing stablecoin, which many people are familiar with USDE, obviously, and its huge supply growth. And then also USDI, which is the institutional Genius compliant stablecoin. So we'll be bringing both of those to the Sui network. 10% of the fees will go to Athena, but 90% will go back to both SUIG and the Sui Foundation and be used to buy back Sui tokens in the market. So, wind forward, 6 months to a year, when you as a Sui community member are faced with the choice of one or two stablecoins, one which takes kind of yield and fees out of the network and one that kind of brings it back in, which would you choose?
Yeah. When is all this going live?
Going live before the end of the year. And we've been working hard over the past couple of weeks. I made a claim that we want to be the Sui bank. And what that means is we want to be a capitalist organization focused on driving liquidity into the ecosystem, building core infrastructure, and more importantly, giving institutional investors on Wall Street access and exposure to what they want. Right now, there is insatiable demand for stablecoins on Wall Street. And if you think about it, you can buy the Circle equity, you can buy Robinhood, you can buy Coinbase. That's about it. And by issuing stablecoins natively on Sui through SUIG, we're now giving institutional investors access to that kind of lightning in a bottle, right? You can get stablecoin exposure through SUIG equity now, and that was one of the strategic things we've executed on since going live.
And also, if you kind of consider what Deepbook is doing around DeFi, I want to play a clip for you because this will get into what you're talking about in reference of expansion. Let's go to that side.
We have a Deepbook ecosystem that looks something like this. The yield-bearing shares that we're going to be generating, those could be used elsewhere in DeFi, right? So now combining passive yield from Athena's with active yield from Deepbook into one product.
Is that something I can hold in my wallet?
Yes, you're going to hold the coin in your wallet, and it's just going to be automatically on its own be accumulating yield. So you don't even have to do anything after you acquire it.
Got it.
All right, so DBUSD now within the DeFi ecosystem, especially around Deepbook as a potential. What does this mean for not only you guys, but I think for the broader ecosystem of the Sui network?
Really driving a lot of energy into Sui DeFi. Sui is still a very young network. It's, approximately 2.5 years old. And it's got some great, kind of DeFi protocols already. We just talked about Deepbook, which is like the home of liquidity, the central limit order book on Sui. Then we have like great kind of borrow lending businesses like Sui Lend, right through to DEXs, perps DEXs like Bluefin, Momentum now coming,
right.
Navi. And what's really interesting is we're essentially bringing in probably the fastest growing synthetic dollar in the world, which is, Athena. And there's a huge kind of DeFi culture around looped Athena Aave trades with Pendle.
Yeah.
There's been a huge growth of TVL on Plasma, another Caratage portfolio company, through Athena and Aave. And what we wanted to do is bring that into Sui. And I think that's like kind of like striking a match. Bringing some spark and bringing some energy to the Sui ecosystem, because now, as in the clip you just showed, you're going to have yield-bearing collateral on margin at many of these trading venues, and that's just super exciting.
What about, because this gets into the retail side of things. If you look at just Game Dollar in general, the launch obviously of SuiPlay, how does that come into it? Does SUIG replace the Sui Game Dollar?
The two stablecoins, Sui USD and USDI, we are there to, kind of compete and also to be complementary to other stablecoins. I don't think it's a replacement. I think it's all about positive competition, right?
Yeah.
I think, the key takeaway here is all of the kind of the return from that activity should really go back into the ecosystem. And I think, as I mentioned, Guy's been a real kind of leader in that charge. With his Athena product. And what we wanted to do is just bring that to Sui. And I think, as I mentioned before, faced with the choice of like Circle, USDC, and, kind of yield and fees leaving the network, or Sui USDE, where that comes back into the ecosystem in the form of buybacks of the token. I think that's like very profound. And I think that it's bullish, like people, are excited by it. All of the community members I met in Singapore were super excited. All of the protocol founders in Sui DeFi, super excited. They're like, Steve, I want to work with you on this. I want to make it a native stablecoin asset in my protocol. We want to build vaults around it. Ton of new kind of design thinking around what we can do with white labeling Athena here. So it's really exciting kind of the next few months ahead.
Do you think, Stephen, that we're going to see a mass exodus out of banking, traditional capital, starting to seek out these kinds of opportunities, especially around, a lot of this yield-bearing stablecoins, but it's going to come across a lot of different ways, both the exchange side, obviously we'll see it in the DeFi side. What are your thoughts on that?
I think in many kind of parts of the world, it's already broken out. If you look at emerging markets, everyone uses Tether, right? Half the world's already moved. I mean, I'm here in the UAE at the moment. Crypto penetration here is insane. Like everyone uses it. I think we've seen a huge unlock in 2025. I think the regulatory path has been cleared for sure with the Genius Act. Obviously, we're waiting for clarity and we're waiting for a few others, but I think it's never been brighter for crypto, for institutional adoption. It's really typified in organizations like Stripe coming out with Tempo. I think that's going to be a huge piece of competition, if I'm honest. But I welcome it. I think we're seeing huge demand for kind of corporate banking, transaction banking services using stablecoins. Right. Yeah. That's growing in the background. It doesn't maybe get the same kind of credit because it's not a retail use case, but I see huge growth there. And even with fintechs that are using stablecoin infrastructure in the back end is crazy. Mm-hmm. Like one of my kind of portfolio companies at Caritage is a company called like OpenFX. Their volumes have grown exponentially to billions in 12 months because they're essentially facilitating like fintech flows right. in the back end using stablecoins, which is crazy. And like that's where real world corporate or institutional adoption and where I would say traffic is leaving the banking system, if you want to kind of phrase it like that for your question.
Can you give me any updates on the asset treasury, on the Sui asset treasury side of things?
Yeah, so we've been busy. We've accumulated over 100 million Sui tokens. Definitely, there has been volatility in the Sui price, and I acknowledge that, and I was prepared for that. Both ourselves, Caritage, and the Sui Foundation were the sponsors of this DAT, and we actually locked our shares for 12 months because we wanted to prove to the market that these DATs, they're not trades. I think, unfortunately, they've become a bit of a speculative kind of frenzy in the summer. But our commitment here was to build the Sui Bank, to build a long-term, permanent capital vehicle, and to be the face of Sui in the capital markets. That's the role that we play. We are a bridge. We are a conduit between latent demand in Wall Street and institutional investors, from long-term capital to multi-strat hedge funds to wealth managers. That demand has been throttled for many years because of a unclear regulatory environment, a previous SEC regime, and now it's open. 2025 is the landmark year where it finally opened, and my job as the CIO of SUIG is to just bridge that appetite, bridge that demand into crypto, but specifically into the growth of Sui. So we've accumulated over 100 million Sui tokens. We are very bullish on the price of Sui as a token in the next 1, 2, 5, and 10 years. That's why we chose to custody this asset in the public markets. And just this week, Cantor Fitzgerald issued a 42-page piece of equity research on SUIG and Sui. And he talks in that research about how he believes, this is an independent, senior MD at Cantor Fitzgerald. He talks about how he believes the Sui price will actually reach Solana's market cap. And if that was the case, he has a price target for SUIG of $49, which is incredible, right? That's such a great example of how Wall Street now is talking, analyzing, authoring about our industry, about Sui specifically, and about SUIG, the DAT, which is cool.
I like to hear those kind of things. Of course, sometimes Wall Street to me is still a little bit far out in terms of understanding where crypto is going, because they've missed a lot of speculation around some of these target zones that have been, kind of put out there. So I'm still kind of on the fence as to how bullish they are versus what the market truly will do, which could be good or bad.
I've got a great line for you. I met with another head of research from another bank, and he said, it's funny, last year, crypto was not even on my top 20 list of things to write about. Exactly. And now this year, it's 4 meetings a day. How do we talk about it? How do we sell it? How do we monetize it? That's a Wall Street bank. He said it's every day, daily meetings. How do we compete?
Oh, they found their new candy. There's no doubt.
We see SME credit as a multi-$100 billion opportunity for DeFi, and we're very much keen on exploring those areas, understanding how they're very complementary to function on Sui's blockchain rails, and to look for really interesting kind of commercial opportunities for our shareholders to get return that can be driving our balance sheet into protocols in the ecosystem, doing lending, creating institutional grade insurance pools, taking stakes in new exciting companies that are building in the Sui ecosystem. There's a ton of things that we're working on, and obviously the biggest one is actually building infrastructure. We're issuing native stablecoins on Sui, and that's the type of effort you should expect to see from a management team who really wants to drive equity value in the DAT.
In terms of the treasury itself, will they use vaults? Are you guys planning to use vaults like what Kai Finance has out there? What's the plan?
Yeah, we're going to be looking at a ton of DeFi strategies where we use our balance sheet to drive return, but we've got to do it with a kind of risk overlay to make sure that we protect shareholders. The Sui team announced Bitcoin Hashi, which is super exciting to me personally. We are large Bitcoiners at Heritage, and to see that the Sui team is now going to be introducing Hashi, where you can run essentially a Bitcoin-like client on the Sui validator set, and essentially find a path towards minting stablecoins natively against Bitcoin that's securely held and qualified custodians without bridging risk, without synthetics. That's very interesting, and that's all about unlocking the prize asset. A $2 trillion asset, Bitcoin.
Right.
1% of Bitcoin, I think, is wrapped, or 2%, right? And that is the most pristine source of collateral in our industry. And unlocking 5, 10, 20% of that into DeFi
will be huge.
Massively grow Sui's TVL, and it'll be a really exciting kind of development for the whole crypto industry. We can really unlock BTC-Fi.
What do you think, Stephen, will be the super app for Sui? You look at Polymarket, many others outside that pump.fun over here with Solana. I mean, there's been some winners. What do you think about the Sui network? What could do it?
Yeah, I think prediction market's an incredible development, and I think both Kalshi and Polymarket are doing great things. We have a large kind of portfolio of assets in iGaming, which stands for sports betting casinos, and we know that industry extremely well and have done very well investing in it. Personally, I'm a little bit biased because I did spend a lot of my career previously in artificial intelligence, but one of the things that I'm personally most kind of attached to in Sui is this object-orientated model versus the account-based models that we see in other blockchains like Avalanche, Solana, and Ethereum.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm so interested in that is because it opens a whole new design space for what blockchains can do. And one specific example of that kind of killer billion-dollar, trillion-dollar app that you refer to, I think is, actually a category. It's agentic commerce, where I say to ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok, I want 30% yield. From Sui, from Solana, from Ethereum. Go get it for me.
The reality is, I still think that's a ways off. That's probably one of the biggest, areas of potential growth for sure.
One thing that kind of brings it to life is this recent partnership between Sui and Google. So Google DeepMind, which is a company I worked with back at the University College London AI Research Lab, penned recently a new agentic commerce framework called AP2. And they chose Sui as a launch partner. And actually, Sui was used for a pilot demonstration of how Sui and this agentic framework could interact. And what Sui showed off was one of its really unique features, which is kind of based around both its object-oriented model and this thing called PTBs, programmable transaction blocks, where you can do like multiple concurrent transactions in the same block. They've built Walrus, which is decentralized programmable storage. Right. You would have Nautilus for like verifiable off-chain compute. You could use Seal for kind of key encryption and secrets management. More importantly, you could use something like ZK Login to use your Google credentials to sign in. So all of those different kind of pieces of the Sui stack, which they've been building for the past 2 years, will enable the agentic web to flourish. And if you think of a good parallel, look at like GCP, Google Cloud Platform, or AWS or Azure, right? They built like a cloud stack, and that allowed for the SaaS industry to flourish, which ran for the past, like call it 10 years or 15 years, sure. Right? I think that the Sui stack will enable the agentic web. That's the kind of parallel we're talking about. And the unlock here is huge. What's the TAM of human e-commerce?
Exactly.
Right? What's the TAM agentic commerce. Well, it sounds pretty big.
Yeah, it's going to be unbelievable. Of course, if you guys want to learn a little bit more about Sui Group Holdings, you can jump over to suig.io. Stephen, it's been good having you on the show. There's a lot brewing right now. I imagine we're going to hear more news coming very soon out of you guys and the Sui team. So we'll definitely get you back then. But thanks for coming into the show today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, you guys know what to do. Make sure and get into our Diamond Circle. That's our special group that's just for you. And it's free. It gets an email that does a great job of, I think, outlining what's culminating in the market that week. Of course, some of my own recommendations of where I'm going and what I see in the market. And of course, you can follow me on X @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on The Paul Barron Show. Take care.